In this video, we will discuss the essay titled Art as Technique by Viktor Shklovsky. Shklovsky is an important figure of the Russian formalism. So let's first look at what Russian formalism is. To begin with, Russian formalism is similar to the new criticism of UK and US. Just like new critics, formalists also believed in the autonomy of the text. That is, the text is complete in itself. There is no point in looking for meanings outside the text. So instead of trying to understand the meaning of the text using background information, the author's biography, or the context, the formalist used form and technique present in the text. In short, they studied the literariness of the text. The two important schools, intellectual schools, that led to the development of formalism are the Opoyas and the Moscow Linguistic Circle. The first one, the Opoyas, was in St. Petersburg. It was dissolved under political pressure. The writer of our essay, Viktor Shklovsky, was part of the Opoyas. Another linguistic school is the Moscow Linguistic Circle in Moscow. This group was a counterpart to the Opoyas. An important figure of this school is Roman Jakobson. Now, when I mentioned Opoyas, I had already told that Opoyas was dissolved under political pressure. This is because when the formalists analyzed literature, they only studied the text. They did not care about the political context in which the text was written. Thus, during those times, formalism was condemned for its lack of political perspective. Now, moving on to the writer of the essay, Viktor Shklovsky, who is a 20th century Russian writer. As mentioned earlier, he is associated with Russian formalism. His major works include Art as Technique or Art as Device, Sue or Letters Not About Love, and Theory of Prose. He was not only a part of the Opoyas, it was Viktor Shklovsky who founded the Opoyas, or Society for the Study of Poetic Language. Now, the major concept of Shklovsky's essay, Art as Technique or Art as Device, is the concept of defamiliarization. Our essay, Art as Technique, was published in 1917. Later on, Shklovsky published it as the first chapter of the new work Theory of Prose in 1925. Through this essay, Shklovsky argued for the need to turn something that has become over-familiar into something revitalized. That is, he wants the artist or writers to make the familiar look unfamiliar. The ordinary and familiar objects are made to look different. This is the major idea in the essay Art as Technique. Let's move into the essay. So this is how the essay begins. According to Shklovsky, when perception or how we see things become habitual, it becomes unconsciously automatic. He also gives some examples. The first example is that of holding a pen. We are all so used to writing and holding a pen that we don't think anymore about how we are holding the pen. The same way, Shklovsky says that using a foreign language for the first time would be totally different from how we would use that language for the 10,000th time. Even in the case of the ordinary everyday language that we speak, there are certain words or phrases that we leave unfinished or half expressed. Slowly, we start to see objects not in their entirety, but rather we only recognize them by their main characteristics. And as a result, ultimately, even the essence of what it actually was is forgotten. For example, imagine that you're late for your class and you just want a quick breakfast. The thing that you grab is an apple and you just leave it in your bag. You may not think about the color of the apple or how pretty the apple looks, because for you, the apple is such a common thing. You are only associating it with one of its main characteristics, which is it is edible. The same happens with everything. The more you see it, the more it becomes habitual, it becomes automatic, and then fails to leave an impression on you. This is called algebraization or over automatization of an object. This is why we need art. Now, apple is a fruit that you see most of the days. But when you see the painting of an apple through the perspective of an artist, then the apple might look artistic. Because through the painting, the artist is making us see things that we have been missing. According to Shklovsky, art exists that one may recover the sensation of life, to make one feel things, to make the stone stony. The purpose of art is to impart the sensation of things as they are perceived and not as they are known. The technique of art is to make the objects unfamiliar. Now, there are two ways by which we can make the things unfamiliar. One is by increasing the difficulty, and the other is by increasing the length of perception. And this is how art removes an object from automatization of perception. Even the literary language that we use in literature is made strange in order to make it different from the ordinary day to day language that we use in our daily lives. So, art and literature removes objects from the automatization of perception. A similar technique is used by Bertolt Brecht in his dramas. His theatre is called the epic theatre, as we know. He uses the technique called alienation effect. His play, Mother Courage and Her Children, uses this technique to bring defamiliarization. Now, we are going to discuss some defamiliarization techniques used by Leo Tolstoy in his works. The first point Shklovsky mentions is that Tolstoy makes the familiar seem strange by not naming the familiar objects. For example, if I tell you that I have an instrument which is made of a long graphite rod with a wooden case around it and it could be used to write, you might have to think to understand that I am talking about a pencil. The same way, Tolstoy describes an object as if he was seeing it for the first time and an event as if it were happening for the first time. He also avoids the accepted names while describing something. For example, Tolstoy defamiliarizes the idea of flogging using this method. Instead of directly using the word flogging, Tolstoy says to strip people who have broken the law, to hurl them to the floor, and to rap on their bottoms with switches to lash about on the naked buttocks. So, this defamiliarizes the idea of flogging and makes the readers think about this process. The same way, Tolstoy's work Cold Stormer is narrated by a horse. These are few lines that the horse says about private property. They agree that only one may say mine about this, that, or the other thing. And the one who says mine about the greatest number of things is the one they consider the most happy. Outsiders in general treated me kindly, yet those who called me their own did not. This is just a narrow human instinct which is called a sense of or right to private property. And people strive not for the good in life but for goods they can call their own. Also, in the work War and Peace, Tolstoy describes battles as if they were something new. Shklovsky also mentions how Tolstoy represented dogmas and rituals as if they are unfamiliar. There are other writers too who have used similar techniques in their works, but Shklovsky used the examples from Tolstoy's works because his works are well known. Moving on, let's discuss the term parallelism. Now, Shklovsky says that using defamiliarization, we can make a familiar object unfamiliar. He also gives us the limits of the application of defamiliarization technique. That is, using this technique, we can only make the object unfamiliar by making the viewers see the object in a different perspective. We can never make the viewers understand the object completely. You can only make them see it in a different perspective, in a different point of view. This is called parallelism. That is, to transfer the usual perception of an object into the sphere of new perception. It is not to make us perceive meaning, but to create a special perception of the object. In order to create this new or special perception of an object, disharmony is important. Disharmony in the harmonious content is important in parallelism. Next, let's look at the language of poetry. Now, poetic language always have a special structure, a special arrangement of words. This is to remove the automatism or perception. According to Aristotle, poetic language should appear strange and wonderful. Only then we can produce the greatest effect using poetry. So the language of poetry is difficult, rough and impeded language. Defamiliarization in poetry occurs through obscure style, phonetic roughening, repetition of identical sounds and so on. So this is how most poets produce poetry. They try to make their poems as strange or foreign as possible. But there are some poets who use the common everyday language that we speak in our day to day life instead of the poetic language. So, this helps them to bring defamiliarization in the readers. Even when we read poems, we find that all poems have a similar language. All poems follow the same poetic language, and then it all looks the same. But once in a while, when the poet uses colloquial language or everyday common language, the poem will look strange. Pushkin is one such writer who used popular language as a special device for prolonging attention. Thus, in a way, colloquial language is also part of defamiliarization. For example, when the Russian literary language started to become part of everyday conversation, writers like Maxim Gorky started to use dialects to defamiliarize. Next, Shklovsky talks about the difference between poetry and prose. On one hand, prose is ordinary speech, which is economical, easy, and proper. On the other hand, poetry is attenuated, tortuous, and informed speech. Rhythm is another important element. Rhythm of prose is an important automatizing element, whereas rhythm in poetry is not. Thus, summarizing the whole essay, Shklovsky is arguing for the need to turn something that has become over familiar into something unfamiliar. And this he calls defamiliarization or making something strange. That's all for this video. I hope you have understood the essay and the major points. If you have found this video useful, please just subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching.